Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I'm here with Phil today, and we're going to be talking politics. We were having a quick discussion. Yeah, I know, right? We were having a quick discussion before coming on about our sort of views of what's going on in politics with the various upcoming elections. I'm in France with lots of stuff happening, and you're in the UK with the general elections coming. And so we were sort of, I want to say, disconcerted by the way that AI is being addressed or not being addressed in some cases. And, my point of view is that fundamentally lots of them, the experts, the AI experts themselves aren't really entirely sure of what it's going to have as an impact in the future and sort of where it's going. It's starting to sort of land, but it's still a bit messy. So, of course, politicians are sort of at a loss, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. I was reading because I'm a bit of a politics geek, the manifestos of the parties in the UK.
Yeah.
Broadly, for those that aren't familiar with the UK, there'll be the big battleground will be between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, and it's looking like the Labour Party will probably win with a landslide in the UK. So I looked with interest just at what their manifesto. So all of the parties talk about promoting AI strategies and the take up of AI,
Yeah.
which was interesting when you think that nobody, even the experts, don't really understand what AI is, how it's going to transform our lives, societies, etc. at the moment. But
Yeah.
all the politicians have jumped on the bandwagon. And I just and I one thing that I'm not sure about, and I wonder whether it would be really interesting just to discuss, is that within politics, France, you're everywhere, you have a kind of a left and a right divide.
Yeah,
And I
for sure.
wonder whether the attitude towards AI is different if you come from the left as it does when you come from the right. Because I personally believe that we're there now, but politicians aren't focused on it. We're going to have a huge battleground around how we control and how states and governments and politicians and regulators control and manage the use of AI in the future. I don't know whether that resonates with you, Eric.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's quite obvious, and you were mentioning the fact that NVIDIA, which is a massive chip making company who basically, for all intents and purposes, are the people who provide the hardware behind what we now call AI. They've just surpassed Microsoft as the largest company in the world. So I think that there's whatever political leaning you have, there's this major notion that AI is now, it's not just a technology issue, it's an economics issue in the broadest sense of the term, right? We there's lots of fear mongering or suspicion or prediction around the fact that AI is going to significantly affect the job market, right? Where lots of jobs are likely to be replaced and or transformed by the oncoming wave of AI tools. And when you couple that with chip making and generally sort of high-end technology often being spearheaded and driven by one or two major technological advances, at the moment it's AI. Every big technological advancement that's likely to happen in the next few years is going to be centered around AI. So from an economics point of view, AI is going to be massive. But then the question is, if you sort of try to look at both sides of the scale, that also means that it's going to have a major social impact, right? If jobs start getting affected, inevitably there will be a social outcome to the rise of AI. So I'm almost surprised to see the Labour Party sort of promoting AI as the next big thing, and I understand that it's a a sales tactic, a political move, but it almost goes against the intuitive sense that, labor, right? It should be about finding ways to keep AI from disrupting people's jobs. Well, maybe not, but that's
Yeah,
sort of
well, yeah.
a surprising outcome, I guess.
Well, there's a whole history going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution and the Labour Party in the UK and the Luddites that were against the introduction of the printing press and modern mechanical takeover of some of their jobs and roles in the past.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found fascinating, so that within all the Conservatives and the Tory manifestos was this promotion of AI.
Mm-hmm.
In the context, they don't really understand my view. They don't really understand what AI is. And where it doesn't feature is in any industrial strategies. So, and I still think there is this sort of antiquated view that industrial strategies are about car manufacturing, they are about aircraft industry.
Yeah.
Those big. It could be. There's lots of debate at the moment around transport and infrastructure
Yeah.
and all of those big issues. But AI doesn't feature in industrial strategies.
Mm-hmm.
But that is going to be the biggest industrial change that we're likely to see since the Industrial Revolution, and it doesn't feature. There's no. I mean, I'd be thinking, who's your minister for AI within government? And to in
Absolutely.
my mind, it's at that level that we should be thinking about within the structure and the mechanisms how states and governments are run and organised.
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, I've noticed that lots of the recent regulation and I want to say I guess more knowledge-based work on AI in politics seems to have been coming out of the European Union. Now, whether you agree with the decisions
Yeah.
that are being made is besides the point, but clearly they're probably because it's because of the parliamentary structure, there are people who are a bit more specialized and are going to focus on specific issues. But you have people within the European Union that seem to at least have a grasp of what AI is technologically and functionally, and sort of where it's going, where they're actually, they seem to be trying to set up rules of some sort around the deployment and use of AI. But as you're saying, that absolutely hasn't been the case on the more industrial side. For now, it's been mostly focused on the sort of front end user side, on how you use AI, how your data is used, etc. But as you were saying, like, clearly there's going to be a major shift in how we build things, in who builds things, in the tools and techniques that we're using, and that is going to come fast, or at least it's very likely to, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk, and I understand it around, I think what people refer to as guardrails
Mm-hmm.
around the use of people's personal and private data and information.
Yep.
It's all, ironically, it's all too late because, the genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
All of this data is out there now. This is because regulators and politicians didn't understand and they took their eye off the ball
Yeah.
when the likes of Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Apple were sharing data and platforms willy-nilly.
Yep.
I come from a background in data governance, and I remember trying to talk through my CEO and finance director around why we should have a cookies policy, and just trying to explain actually what happens when you land on a site, and their lack of knowledge and their ignorance around how data is then suddenly taken and used without your knowledge, without your consent.
I'd go even further and
And
and say that we've gotten to the point where the general public, for the most part, there are outliers, but for the most part, are now people have reached the point where they don't really even care anymore. There are lots of people around me who are sort of they have a double vision where they, on one side, they're like, oh yeah, there's great stuff happening where all the big multinational corporations that are stealing our data are being put in their place by governments. Oh, but also I use this service, that service. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and I share all of my life on there, and I don't care. And it's like there's almost this point where you're saying it's too late. It's also too late because people don't really care anymore, even though they intellectually they think they care, they think they find importance in that. They don't really care anymore. And at this point, the people who are still fighting back are more on the side of companies trying to protect their employees and that sort of system where they've got reasons to try and defend from massive information sharing. But AI is probably going to do the same thing, where companies are going to start using AI because it's going to be the only way to compete in some sectors. But that is going to become a massive information leak, and it'll be too late to do anything about it, right?
yeah, and I wonder whether there are different philosophical opinions on it. If I take it back to the very crude analysis, but I think it works around between the left and the right within politics spectrums, whether the more right leaning you are, and
Yeah,
governments are and politicians are, they're going to be much more laissez-faire around their attitude to access to data and
yeah,
access to AI, and whether the more left-leaning politicians, countries, states will be to the more regulated attempts to regulate the use of that
yeah,
information and data. I think you see this kind of battle quite a lot in America, I think,
yeah,
where you do see. Yeah, it's ironic that um, Elon Musk has been the propagator of and one of the users and consumers of data and personal data throughout his kind of career, is up in arms because Apple are going to do to him what he's done to others in the past, to the extent where he's saying no one in my firm, no one at Tesla can bring their Apple to work.
yeah,
I think he was quoted as saying,
yeah,
because and it's kind of it's interesting how these battlegrounds are going to be fought out. And I do wonder, and I think I really worry for the lack of knowledge that political parties and politicians and ministers have, and their civil servants and their advisors.
yeah,
They seem to, from my limited perspective on this, what I've seen is when they want to know what's going on, they seem to call in the uh, big corporates, your Microsofts, your Facebooks, your Googles, their executives to ask them what the effect of AI is going to be. Well, the best will in the world, you're only going to get their view of what they think the world's going to look like. They're not going to tell you that it's all going to be uh, difficult, challenging. You should regulate us. You should tax us. You should
yeah.
stop us. You should
Well,
delay us. All those conversations.
for all intents and purposes, they're asking the salesman to write their research papers, right? They're trying to
That's a good,
get
better way of saying it. Yeah,
they're
yeah.
trying to get an objective point of view from someone whose job it is to be subjective and to be, motivated by um, maybe not greed, but at least profit. Since all of these are publicly traded companies, they have a built-in incentive for profit. So, it may be that they're the foremost experts because they've hired all the existing experts, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a conflict of interest, and clearly it's becoming an issue. To I think there's a very interesting parallel that can be drawn with something that happened in the past when we had sort of the arrival of the internet. It's something that sort of flew under the radar of most politicians, and it's only once
Yeah,
people started
exactly.
massively adopting online tools that politicians became interested in it in a real sense. Right now, I guess what's happening is politicians are interested in the buzzword AI to be elected. They're interested in something that is that image being sold by the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the Apples of this world. But I doubt that many politicians are actually questioning what is what actually is the underlying uh, technology and what can or will it do. What they're questioning is what's being sold to us. Is that something we need to regulate against? But it's very possible that the image that we're being told, AI is going to be is false and it'll be something different. If you asked someone in the 90s what the internet was going to do, I doubt that many people would have predicted what happened. Even the people who were, you know, building it and profiting from it. It's hard to tell. It's hard to predict that. So at this point, we should almost have a system where, you know, AI in politics should not be about what's currently being sold. It should be asking researchers what it could turn into and what it could affect. Which, when we look at
Yeah,
that, it's mostly going to be, as you were saying, affecting industry, affecting some forms of, you know, um, service jobs, and lots of those things. We already have hints as to where it's going to go, but there's no definitive proof yet, or at least not to my knowledge.
no, I was, I've minded like when you said that. Just think what I've read quite a lot is around transparency.
Yeah,
A lot of politicians saying they want these tech firms to be transparent around lift up the hood and show us what you're doing with
mm-hmm.
AI under the bonnet. We want to take a look.
Yeah,
That reminds me, I wonder whether Henry Ford, when he invented the Model T for the motor car,
yeah,
it's the same equivalence. It's like he's opened up and he showed you what the engine looks like,
yeah,
and he's told you that the car can go 30 miles an hour and everything, and he's shown you going around a racetrack and all of that, and everyone's looked at it. But But no one could have predicted where the world we are now. The whole world transformed. Overnight, no more horses. You had cars. You
yeah,
had roads. You had infrastructure. You had petrol to drive the cars. You had lorries. You had trains. You had everything. The
yeah.
whole world changed, and
The
that feels the
appearance of
same to me as what the politicians are doing.
yeah,
Yeah. So the politicians are wanting to look underneath it. They're not looking at, well, how is this going to fundamentally and radically change and transform the world and society in which we live?
yeah,
I mean, there was
exactly.
I think it was last year, the UK had an AI summit at Bletchley Park,
Hmm.
and all the kind of AI, and they all sort of, and all the leaders around the kind of the Western world, I think they all attended this conference. They heard from big speakers, and our Prime Minister was there, and they all came away going, yeah, AI, that looks really challenging. It could be a real risk. We need to have a safety bill over the top of it.
Yeah,
But none of that seems. I don't know if it's the same in France, but none of that made its way into actually what we are um, talking about at the moment within the general elections.
yeah,
Nobody's got their manifesto or their party pledge saying, and this is how we're going to govern AI as it's introduced. And this is what we're going to do to make sure and support the effective rollout of AI within the UK PLC or within Europe or
yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean? It's like I
Yeah.
think it's really quite fascinating.
I, I,
No politician's really taking it seriously.
I think what we're sort of touching on here is that instead of looking at how AI is made, they need to look at how AI is used. And so there are
Yeah,
situations where looking at how AI
yes,
is made is important. Like there's the very, clear case of current AI models are built by, whether you like it being said that way or not, stealing people's work. And that is a question.
yes,
Is that okay?
yes.
Is that not? That's a question that needs to be addressed. But once that's sorted, if it ever is, that's just, that's just a very small piece of the puzzle. And it doesn't really have any effect other than if we regulate it to preserve people's creative um, ownership, then it will slow down the rise of AI by a bit. That's probably the only effect it would have. Beyond that, the impact of AI is still going to be there. So the question is, how is it being used, not how is it made? And clearly, I don't think many politicians are addressing that at this point. I haven't seen much of it discussed here in France or at the European Union level. And from what you were saying, there's
No,
pretty much nothing happening on the UK side for that.
no. And I think there's nowhere I don't see any of the political leaders, and I may be wrong, and I'm sure where are the bodies and the research, the organisations, and I'm talking more about the the not-for-profit kind of independent view
Mm-hmm.
of what the world will look like within AI.
Yeah,
We have a lot of uh, um, maybe that's where we should aim for, Eric. Maybe this is what we need to be promoting, which is there a party? I wonder whether there will be in time. There'll be, representative of data and of AI,
yeah,
sort of like the equivalent of what we had in the UK of the Luddites in the
yep,
past, so coming out and saying, we don't want to do this. We don't want you taking our data. We don't want you using our data. We don't want to use AI. It'll be interesting to see whether that starts to be a thing within politics as people get to understand it a little bit more.
yeah.
But
Interestingly enough,
one of the things that you mentioned,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
um, oh no, you go.
No, I was going to say, interestingly enough, it's almost like there's the opposite party already exists. Like, we've seen groups like the Pirate Party, which have been pretty big in the European Union, where their initial premise, and I haven't really followed what they've done in the past few years, but their initial premise was that all data, all information should be freely accessible. Which, think of it what you will, it's sort of I think one of the points was that if everything is freely accessible to everyone, then there's no longer an issue of theft and problems around people misusing your information, because if everyone has it, then it's no longer yours, which is a very the way I'm presenting it may be a bit naive, but it's almost the exact opposite of what you're saying is going to happen, which is going to be a data protection uh, uh, policy coming into politics, which is currently not very present, I guess. And
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Isn't that where? Sorry to talk over you,
no,
but
go
isn't that
ahead for
where
sure.
the World Wide Web came back? That was, it started with an egalitarian aim of sharing, making information freely available so humanity could use it for good.
Yeah,
But
and
as soon as it was unleashed, the forces of capitalism jumped upon it
yeah,
and then started to introduce levels of ownership and
ownership. Yep,
selling and consumerism
yep, exactly.
around it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. I
It's,
so I'm
and
sort
it's
of going.
interesting on the large land.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just going to end. Sorry, Eric. I'll
No,
just
no, no, for
say
sure.
it's really interesting that you never hear. I've never heard a politician say, "Well, what happens to all the people? The large language models that now everyone's using and you can use for free are for some, and I don't know some people out there. that's theft of their knowledge.
Yep.
That's theft of their writing and the stuff that they've done in the past. I'm
Hmm.
not sure that anybody ever asked them whether they would be all their information could be used on a large language model, but it's just been scraped and it's just being used
Yep.
without, to my knowledge, in many instances, people's consent. But
Yeah.
every politician of every colour and stripe seems to think that's perfectly acceptable to do.
Yeah. And
And I think
the
that,
only people
and then after it,
I was just going to say
God,
the only people who are currently fighting against that are, as far as I can tell, artists and writers, people whose
yeah,
revenue and
exactly.
whose livelihood is based off of their creative potential and the things that they've made that will then be used by AI.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think, uh, and no, that's what I mean about politicians sort of walking into this AI world, if you like, blindly
Yeah.
and not really knowing and understanding. So when they, and this sort of, to kind of wrap this up into some sort of, we've had a good rambling talk, which we always like, is, yeah, kind of wrap this up is that all the politicians of every stripe, from what I've researched, are all uberly supportive of AI
Yeah.
and will talk fondly about how it's going to liberate people's lives and do many things on one hand. So
Mhm.
it's going to be make us more productive, help us to innovate, it's going to help us to problem solve. You've got that on one hand. On the other hand, you've got people saying we need safety around AI. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know how it's going to operate.
Yep.
Well, can you have the two, the paradoxes held at the same time? And equally, down the middle are people that feel like they are being exposed and exploited for the use of that data and information.
Yep.
It may be that they're using their intellectual property
Mhm.
and they're stealing that from creatives and writers and authors that are using that stuff, or it could be from people thinking actually I could be losing my job as a consequence of
Yep.
using AI. And that debate doesn't seem to be happening anywhere,
No.
in my view.
And
And
I
none of the political parties, none of the politicians are grasping that.
to sort of close this fully for today, I think that I'm going to sort of leave our viewers and listeners with a question, which is if this is a major issue that needs to be addressed at the political level, and currently everyone seems to be a bit clueless. Think about what it does and how you should react to this at an individual or a company level, right? Because what's true for politicians is
Yeah.
also going to be very true and very important within companies and teams. Is your team going to adopt AI? How? What impact is it going to have? And do you need to put any guardrails or safety measures in? So I think that's a debate for another day, but it's fundamentally the same question, just at another scale, really. And on that note,
That's a very good point, Eric.
no worries. On that note, thank you
We
everyone
shall, we shall,
for listening, and we'll see you next time. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like what we do, and ciao.
thank you. Bye bye.